Joining me right now, our longtime friend, good friend of mine, I'm pleased to say, honored to say, Emmy Award-winning host from NBC and MLB Network, Bob Costas. How are you, Bob?
I'm good, Rich. Although, when you talk about the first team to come back from 3 or more in the ninth since 1971, that's a heck of a thing for the Angels, because in one of those games, the first of them, they scored 7 times in the ninth. But, of course, the setting matters even more. And when you think about the drama of it, think of the 2001 World Series, when in games 4 and 5, down to their last out, the Yankees got homers from Tino Martinez and from Scott Brosius to tie the D-backs. And although the D-backs went on to win in a dramatic 7th game, you can't have outcomes less likely in those circumstances on consecutive nights in a World Series that didn't just have the usual drama of the World Series, but within the immediate aftermath of 9/11. When you're talking about drama with the whole baseball world watching, as opposed to just one of 15 games on a slate on a given night, nothing against what the Angels have done. That's a heck of a thing if you're an Angel fan. But to have that happen that October or early November whatever it was, that was on a scale of its own.
Yeah, one of those home runs, I can't remember off the top of my head, led to the Jeter Mr. November, where he hit it after midnight on Halloween night in the Bronx. I remember that night.
That's right.
Exactly. I remember that night. So, and then, the Rangers already have had trouble closing games right now. And it's just interesting how panic can set in so quickly in a baseball season, Bob, when you think about it.
You know what happens early on in the season? I heard Aaron Boone talking about this on an ESPN game the other night with Dan Schulman. You get up to bat, you're 1 for 10. Guys are going to win batting titles and have stretches where they go 1 for 10. It happened to Tony Gwynn, it happened to Rod Carew or George Brett. But if you're 1 for 10 and it's the 3rd game of the year, you look up at the scoreboard, you're batting 100. That's enough to make you swing at the first pitch just to get it off the board and get yourself back into the dugout. So everything is kind of overblown early on. He's lost his first 2 starts. He got knocked out in the 3rd inning, so his ERA is 13. He's 2 for his first 15 times at bat. Everything is magnified, but the thing that has to be remembered about baseball is that it's 162 games. We were really surprised about a week ago when, after the Cavaliers went into Boston and put it on the Celtics in a game that really mattered for the top seed in the East, they turned around and Atlanta slapped them around the very next night. Because it's basketball, that seems odd. Whereas in baseball, the worst team's going to win 60 and lose 100. The best team's going to win 100 and lose 60. And on a given day, a team that's going to finish in the basement is going to beat the team that's going to win the World Series 9-2, and some guy who's going to bat 228 is going to go 4 for 5. It's just the nature of baseball, and it all evens out over 162.
But you could, while we're, I guess, construing these two sports together, what would happen if Major League Baseball is going through what the NBA is going through right now, Bob, where one team has a chance to make the playoffs, other teams are dependent on a competitive game happening, so they perhaps can make the playoffs, and a team like the Brooklyn Nets that is 40 games under 500 decides to rest their players because it's been a long season. I mean, could you imagine something like that happening in Major League Baseball?
No, not exactly like that, because the Nets situation makes no sense at all. But here's what can happen, and it's an unavoidable consequence. Let's suppose that you're locked in to one of the 2 wild card spots. So you want to make sure that your best pitcher pitches the wild card game.
Sure.
But another team that you happen to be playing, it's just the way the schedule worked out, doesn't have a wild card shot necessarily, but is playing for first place in its own division, and the pace in the division isn't fast enough to yield a wild card, but you can still win the division. Now you hold back your best players because you're getting ready for the wild card game. Meanwhile, this game means everything to the team you're playing. That could happen.
That could happen.
There have to be some interleague games, or at least 1 or 2, right at the end of the season, even though they try to avoid them and play divisional games. There can be games that mean everything to one team, and it means more rest, especially your pitchers, in baseball at the end. But that would only happen with contenders. I can't see something comparable to what the Nets did I have no idea what the Nets are thinking.
I have no idea either. And I know Adam Silver's probably wringing his hands over this sort of thing. He just can't. There's no way to figure out. I mean, just this past week, Bob, with the Cavs resting LeBron and Kyrie Irving on Monday night after losing to one of those aforementioned Hawks games that you mentioned over the weekend, the Cavs said they were injured. You know, that's what they said. They were injured, and yet they played 92 combined minutes the day before, running around like deers. You know. So,
and, you almost can't blame them. Greg Popovich figured out a way around this over the course of the long season. The objective is to win the championship. He had a veteran team. He did a very smart thing. But something else you have to take into account is that while all sports tickets have gone up in price, even more so than inflation would indicate, they're all more expensive than they used to be. Good seats to an NBA game are especially expensive, especially when you consider the fact that whether you want to pay what you have to pay to get into a football game or not, there's only 8 regular season football games. There's 41 regular season home basketball games. And these seats cost hundreds of dollars. And maybe if you're in a different conference, let's say you're in the Western Conference, this is the one time the Cavs are coming to your town, the one time they're coming to Portland during the regular season. So you shelled out the money to see LeBron. And this is the night that Tyronn Lue decides, I got to rest LeBron. He's got his reasons, but you've got your reasons to be pulling your hair out. Because maybe on StubHub or something, you paid $5,000 for 2 tickets.
Well, and Bob, you mentioned the 8 regular season games in the NFL. At least with the NFL, you have an opportunity to get tickets to go to something like the draft or even the combine, Bob, right? You can go you can go view the combine in person, you know?
Well, Rich, you know me. I never miss a moment of the combine. Even if it means that I have to pay usurious rates in order to, and that's a word I haven't used in a while. In fact, I don't think I'll ever use it again.
By the way, it's a Rich Eisen show first, by the way. Usurious rates.
Even if I have to meet somebody in a dark alley and do an exchange with a sealed envelope, I'm going to get my tickets to the combine because there's nothing that fascinates me more than watching guys essentially go through calisthenics in some kind of meat market and then speculate as to whether or not the Seahawks might take them in the 6th round. This rivets me. I gave up tickets to Hamilton in order not to miss that.
If I gave you 2 tickets, if I gave you a seat at one of these 2 things and you had to take one, Bob. You had to take one, okay? You can't say I refuse these seats. One seat, okay? One seat is at the combine. The other one is on one of these talk shows where you have to have a split screen and an argument and a topic bar and a hashtag on these sports TV shows where you got to go on and you have to have an argument. Which one?
Right.
You have to be part of the argument sports scene or a ticket to the combine. Which one would you accept?
Well, those shows generally last only half an hour or at most an hour. The combine lasts a month on my own calculation.
Bob!
So I think we have the tiebreaker right there.
It's duration? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's how long the torture lasts that I'm basing this on. Now, by the way, even though this can't happen because the revenue is too great, there's a way around this for the NBA.
Okay.
It makes sense from a fan standpoint, but it just doesn't make financial sense.
Lay it on me.
If you cut the season to 72 games, unless my math is wrong, if you cut the season to 72 games, you'd be playing 2 games against every team, a home and home against every team. Wait a minute. I'm going to get this wrong.
No, you're not.
There's a way. I had this figured out the other night.
Okay.
But I'd had a couple of glasses of wine and I made more sense. There's a way to cut this to 72.
Yes.
Where you're only playing 1 game against each team in the other conference.
Okay.
And then you'd alternate it season to season. And you would play more games against teams logically in your own conference, and you would cut the schedule to 72, which would create enough breathing room that while it wouldn't eliminate resting guys, it would take some of the incentive away and some of the rationale away for resting guys to cut it to 72. But think how hard it is to get baseball to cut back to 154 or even 158, which makes tremendous sense to cut back to 154. You've got all these, games where some team plays an afternoon game on Monday and then flies all the way across the country and plays a night game on Tuesday. That's not good for anybody. It's not good for the players. It's not good for the paying customers. You're not getting the best quality of baseball. And they play 162, and it's hard enough to get them to cut back just a tiny fraction. It makes sense, but the money's just too big, and so it's probably a non-starter.
Bob, before I let you go, I'm going to take a shot here and ask you, do you have a good Don Rickles story? You ever meet him, come across him on a Letterman or in a green room somewhere?
Oh, yeah.
What do you got?
Yeah. I knew Don fairly well, and like everybody will tell you, the merchant of venom, Mr. Warmth, as Johnny Carson dubbed him, but he was such a sweetheart. And remember, I had this show that came on after Letterman when the lineup was Johnny Carson, David Letterman, and then I did my little puppet show at like 1:30 in the morning.
I watched later. I watched it. It was great.
It was pretty good.
It was great.
If I did say so myself.
Yes.
Anyway, so Carson came on and Letterman came on and then I came on. So Rickles comes on just as a favor. He's a big sports fan, so I had met him through Tommy Lasorda. And he's going through this whole thing, and it's really funny. It's just one thing after another. And then all of a sudden he looks at me and he makes that Rickles face. He goes, "You're a dull guy." You know that? You're a dull guy. And because it was Rickles, the entire place cracks up. If anybody else said it, it's like a Rodney Dangerfield joke. It's only funny when Dangerfield tells it. So now let's fast forward, and this is less than a year ago. And I'm at a restaurant that is a favorite of both yours and mine, and we will not reveal the location, but
sure.
I'm at this restaurant. You can picture the situation. And he's at the table that leads to the hallway that takes you to the restrooms. And his back is to me. And I had come in after him, and I have no idea that he and his wife, Barbara, and his party are there. So I get up, excuse myself, I'm going to the men's room, and as I walk down that hallway, I see the unmistakable frame of the late 80s, 88, 89-year-old Don Rickles. There's no doubt that it's him, but he has no idea that I'm there. So I tap him on the shoulder. I say, "Don, how are you doing?" And he looks over his right shoulder, and this is how quick he was. In a millisecond, he looks over his right shoulder. He's 89 years old. He sees me, and he says in front of this table of people, "I say this as a friend. People are getting tired of you."
Instead of saying hello, that's your
right.
That's his opening line.
Right. I say this as a friend. People are getting tired of you.
Oh, but that's the ultimate compliment, right, Bob? To get that from him?
To be insulted
right?
by Rickles is as good as it gets.
Bob, you're the best. I'll see you in New York, if not before, at the Emmys. We'll see you there.
Yeah, we have a date at the Combine. If I miss you at the Emmys, I'll see you at the Combine.
Well, sort of in the same way. Sort of in the same way that Jerry Glanville always left a ticket for Elvis, I'm always going to leave a ticket for you at the Combine, Bob. Okay?
And one of these days, I'm going to surprise you and actually use it.
Oh, I can't wait for that day.
There you go.
Take care, Bob.
Have a good day.
You got it. It's Bob Costas.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern on Audience.